A handful of men stand inside a crumbling old mission in the middle of Texas. They have no reinforcements coming, they have no escape plan, and marching toward them just over the horizon is one of the most powerful armies in the entire Western Hemisphere. Most of these men know they're going to die, and they stay anyway. But here's what your history teacher probably never told you. This wasn't some glorious, honorable last stand cooked up by noble freedom fighters. This was the bloody, desperate, politically messy result of a land grab, a broken government, and a dictator who had absolutely had enough. Today, we're going back. The real story of the Alamo, the politics, the betrayal, the men who actually died there, and the one decision that changed everything. To understand the Alamo, you have to understand what Texas even was in 1836. And most people get this completely wrong. Texas, or Tejas as it was called, was not some empty frontier. It was a northern province of Mexico. And Mexico had actually invited American settlers in. They needed bodies. The land was vast, mostly ungoverned, and constantly raided by Comanche warriors who made the Mexican military look like amateurs. So Mexico made a deal. Come settle here, follow our laws, convert to Catholicism, become Mexican citizens. In exchange, you get land. Cheap, free even. Thousands of Americans took that deal. By the early 1830s, there were more Anglo-American settlers in Texas than Mexican citizens, and that's when things started going sideways. The settlers didn't really want to become Mexican citizens. Many of them didn't speak Spanish. They ignored the Catholic Church requirement. They were bringing enslaved black people into a country that had abolished slavery, and they were making it very clear, openly, loudly, that they still felt more American than Mexican. Mexico started getting suspicious, and honestly, they had every right to be. Then, in 1833, a man named Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna came to power. History often paints him as a cartoon villain, a tyrant in fancy epaulets. But early in his career, he was actually a liberal reformer. He came to power with broad support, but power does things to people. By 1835, Santa Anna had dissolved the Mexican Congress, scrapped the Constitution of 1824, and made himself dictator. Protests erupted all over Mexico, not just in Texas. Multiple states rebelled. Santa Anna crushed them one by one. Texas was next on the list. Now let's talk about who was actually inside those walls. The official defender count at the Alamo sits somewhere between 180 and 260 men. Historians still argue about the exact number. What we do know, they were badly outnumbered, poorly supplied, and led by a trio of men who, frankly, did not get along. First, William Barrett Travis, 26 years old, a lawyer from South Carolina who had fled to Texas after abandoning his wife and child back home. He was ambitious, dramatic, and desperately wanted to be a war hero. He was officially in command of the regular Texian army forces at the Alamo. Second, Jim Bowie, a legend in his own time. A land speculator, slave trader, and knife fighter so notorious that the blade he favored became known simply as the Bowie knife. He was popular with the volunteer fighters and clashed constantly with Travis over who was actually in charge. By the time the battle began, Bowie was bedridden, either from typhoid, pneumonia, or tuberculosis, depending on which account you believe. He commanded from a cot. Third, Davy Crockett, former congressman from Tennessee, folk hero. At 49, he had recently lost his seat in Congress and essentially showed up in Texas because he had nothing better to do. He was there as a volunteer private, though his celebrity made him immediately one of the most visible men at the fort. These three men, a runaway husband, a slave trader, and a washed-up congressman, were the face of the Alamo defense. And the soldiers, a mix of Texian settlers, recent American immigrants looking for adventure, a handful of Mexican Texans called Tejanos who were fighting against Santa Anna's dictatorship, and a group of free black men and enslaved men whose names history has mostly forgotten. One name worth remembering, Joe, an enslaved man owned by Travis. He survived the battle and later gave one of the most detailed first-hand accounts of what happened inside those walls. History textbooks almost never mention him. On February 23, 1836, Santa Anna arrived outside San Antonio with the advance units of his army, roughly 1,500, to 1,800 soldiers in total, though more were still marching north. The Texians had expected them. They just didn't expect them this soon. Santa Anna raised a blood-red flag from the church tower in town. In military tradition, that flag had one very clear meaning. No quarter, no surrender, no prisoners. Everyone inside the Alamo would be killed. Travis responded by firing the Alamo's largest cannon. So much for negotiations. Travis immediately sent out two famous letters. The first was addressed to the people of Texas and all Americans, a dramatic call to arms. I shall never surrender or retreat. Victory or death. It's one of the most quoted letters in American history. The second letter was more desperate. It was addressed to a fellow soldier named Sam Houston, essentially pleading for reinforcements. Travis wrote that he expected the enemy to make a general assault at any time and that without help, they could not hold. Help never came. The siege settled into a grinding daily rhythm. Mexican artillery bombarded the Alamo walls. The defenders fired back when they could. At night, small Texian groups made dangerous runs outside the walls. For water, for cattle, for firewood. On day 3, 32 men from the nearby town of Gonzales broke through the Mexican lines to reinforce the Alamo. 32 against 1,800. They knew what they were riding into. They came anyway. And here's the part your textbook left out. Santa Anna offered a deal. Surrender now. Lay down your arms and you'll be treated as prisoners of war, not executed. Some historians believe there were real negotiations. Some defenders may have actually wanted to take it. Travis refused. Or, more accurately, Travis made the choice for everyone. 13 days into the siege. It's 5:30 in the morning on March 6, 1836. The night before, Santa Anna had ordered silence. No campfires, no music. His officers thought he was planning another day of artillery bombardment. He was not. In the darkness before dawn, nearly 1,800 Mexican soldiers formed up in 4 columns surrounding the Alamo on all sides. The plan was a total assault from every direction simultaneously. No retreat, no flanking maneuver, just overwhelming force. At 5:30 a.m., a bugle call shattered the silence. Mexican troops advanced, and then the Alamo's defenders opened fire. The first 2 assault waves were actually repelled. The Texians had placed their best marksmen on the walls, and at close range, rifles and cannon loaded with grape shot were devastating. Mexican soldiers fell by the dozens. The first wave broke, then the second. But 180 men cannot hold every wall. The third wave found gaps. Mexican soldiers began scaling the north wall, then the west. Fighting spilled from the walls into the courtyard, into the barracks rooms, into the chapel. It was over in roughly 90 minutes. Travis was reportedly killed early, shot in the head at the north wall. Bowie died in his cot, too sick to stand, still firing. Crockett's end is one of history's great debates. Did he die fighting, rifles swinging like a club? Or was he captured and executed on Santa Anna's orders? A Mexican officer's diary entry suggests it was the latter. That account was suppressed for decades. Every fighting-age man inside the Alamo was killed. Estimates put the Texian dead between 182 and 257. Santa Anna's forces suffered too, somewhere between 400 and 600 casualties. For a crushing victory, it was remarkably costly. Santa Anna had numerical superiority of nearly 10 to 1, and he still lost hundreds of men taking a crumbling old mission. The women, children, and enslaved people inside were mostly spared. Susanna Dickinson, wife of a defender, was sent by Santa Anna as a messenger to ride to the Texian army and deliver a simple warning. This is what happens when you defy us. He didn't count on what that warning would actually do. Remember, the Alamo became one of the most powerful battle cries in American history, but it wasn't just emotional fuel. It was a strategic turning point that Santa Anna fundamentally misread. The massacre at the Alamo, combined with another atrocity just days later, where Santa Anna executed over 400 Texian prisoners at Goliad, didn't break the Texian resistance, it ignited it. Sam Houston, commander of the Texian army, had been urging retreat for weeks. Now he had men flooding to his cause. Volunteers poured in from across the United States. Rage replaced hesitation. On April 21, 1836, less than 7 weeks after the Alamo fell, Sam Houston's army caught Santa Anna's force at a place called San Jacinto. The battle lasted 18 minutes. 18 minutes. Houston's men attacked during the Mexican army's afternoon rest period. Santa Anna was captured the next day, hiding in the grass, dressed as a common soldier. He was forced to sign the treaties of Velasco, granting Texas its independence. The men who died at the Alamo had bought those 7 weeks. Their 13-day siege had slowed Santa Anna's northward march, exhausted his supplies, and bloodied his troops. Whether it was worth it, that's a question people still argue about today. Here's the uncomfortable stuff. Many of the men at the Alamo weren't dying for freedom in any pure sense. They were dying for land. The Texas Revolution was inseparable from the question of slavery. Mexico had banned it. The Anglo settlers, many of whom had brought enslaved people with them, refused to give it up. Jim Bowie wasn't a freedom fighter. He was one of the largest slave traders in the American South before he came to Texas. Travis owned Joe, who survived the battle and gave detailed testimony, and was then re-enslaved. His freedom didn't come with Texas independence. The Tejanos who fought at the Alamo, Mexican Texans like Juan Seguin, fought because they hated Santa Anna's dictatorship. Some of them later got driven off their own land by the Anglo settlers they fought alongside. None of that makes the courage less real. The men who died at the Alamo, whatever their reasons for being there, faced down an army 10 times their size and did not break. That's not nothing. But the full picture is messier, more human, and honestly more interesting than the myth we were handed in school. 400 men against 1,800. 13 days. Every one of them dead. The Alamo didn't save Texas by itself, but it bought the time, the rage, and the rallying cry that did. And somewhere in the history they never taught you, in the stories of Joe and the Tejano fighters, and the women who survived and were made to carry Santa Anna's message, is the real story of what happened on that ground. If you want more history like this, the stories that got cut from your textbooks, subscribe to Raw American History. We're just getting started.